Hey everyone. So we're gonna have an interesting talk today, but before we start, maybe we can go around and introduce each other. Introduce yourselves, I guess. And if you have anything you want to link or promote, I don't know, talk about it. Tell us how awesome it is. So let's start with Emily.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Emily. I'm a double masculine ENTP, consume, play, blast, sleep. I'm just here to promote myself in general, so welcome.
And you got podcasts and stuff going on, don't you?
Right now, no, it's all on hiatus right now.
All right. Well, where can people find you if they want to?
Just go outside your door and yell out, and I should be able to hear. No, on Facebook.
Well, you'll give me a link and I'll put it in. All right.
Yeah.
How's that? Okay. All right, let's go for it. Jessica.
I'm Jessica. I am a visual SITI, sleep, blast, consume, play. Are we doing social types if we know them?
No, we don't have to do types. Just talk about yourself a little bit and what are you promoting? Aren't you typing people on Enneagram? Is that ready yet? Or?
It's not ready, but we're doing a really good job. So
you are doing a really good job.
Yes,
I agree.
Thank you.
All right. And Mike.
I'm Mike.
So
I'm told. I type audio.
You don't have to say your type, but
okay,
yes.
cool. I'm an ISFP. That's if I remember correctly, I'm an ISFP.
And you got a YouTube channel too going on? Something else going on?
I'm not really active on it anymore. I'm just here because this is my favorite.
You might be one day.
That's true. But yeah, I'm just here because I love this topic. It's my favorite topic.
All right, nice. Okay, well, let's dive into it. So do you want to start us off, Emily, about what you're seeing with narratives? I've got a list of things too.
Sure. Yeah, so we were talking, you and I were talking, you were doing that Andrew Tate video talking about how narratives, number ones kind of try to control the narrative all the time. I think Shannon said that too in one of the deep dive on ones. And it's easy to see Tate doing it because he's such a over the top example of a one.
Especially in that state. That was one of the worst states because he just got out of jail and he probably felt like he was nobody again.
Hey, Ben, I
don't know what's going on there.
Your camera is blurry for me. I don't know if it's just me.
Yeah.
You guys?
We thought you were trying to stay pseudonymous.
Yeah, I thought that too.
Yeah, it's a bad tech.
Gotcha.
It's okay.
You're still handsome though.
I just thought I had glaucoma or something.
All right, well.
It's okay.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it's interesting that the number ones try to control the narrative. I can see why they would do that, but then also a pattern that I've noticed is just that intuitives in general are tracking the narrative more than sensors are tracking the narrative.
Yeah.
So I've talked to a lot of people. Well, I've talked to several, especially lead sensors with intuition last, and just watched them talk about it. And it seems like one of the struggles that they have is not knowing what kind of story they're in. And then when they realize what the story of their life is or what the story of what's happening is, they're like, whoa, I didn't ask for this story. Meanwhile, for a lot of the intuitives, all we can see is the story, which is why we have trouble giving specifics on things. Because it's just it's just the possible storyline without all of the detailed information, if that makes sense.
That is so good. I'm thinking about my Enneagram partner who is typed as an ENFP. And when we type people very differently. And he is super zoned into what is the narrative of what this person is saying. And I can kind of follow what he's like, but it's his go-to. He can see it immediately. He can pick it up. And I'm picking up all the details and then oh yeah, I guess that detail speaks to this narrative. I can see what you're talking about. But it's definitely where he's starting that I'm kind of learning from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you seeing something there too, Mike?
I can just give you my general thoughts on what Emily said, which is that, like you said, Andrew Tate tries to control the narrative. And I wonder if you mean, and I'm pretty sort of familiar with him, but I wonder if you mean if he's trying to control other people's narrative, because everyone has a narrative. Everyone tells a story about what to give meaning to something is to tell a narrative. And we all do that all the time. We all have a story. And if someone realizes that they're in what their story is, what that means is they're realizing the story that they're telling. Even if they got the story from everybody else, even if everyone else is telling that story and they believe it, it's still their story in a sense. So I guess that's my question, Emily, is do you mean that he's trying to control what everybody else thinks?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Ben.
No, it's a good place to start. So, like, spin doctoring is a good way to talk about controlling the narrative. So, like, you have a whole bunch of events, and then depending on which perspective you look at it from, it'll change the meaning of the events, and it could make him higher in other people's eyes if he controls the narrative correctly.
And one little thing I want to add is that any conscious, like, healthy person does control their own narrative. Like, that's what it means to be like self-aware, is that you're aware of the meaning that you give to things, and you have like a sense of leadership about what things mean to you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think from some of the lead censors that I've heard, not only can they not see their own story sometimes, they can't project that to other people. So I think there are levels of it, Mike. Like you were saying, if you can see what your own story is and make that story for yourself, like in your DI or your OI or whatever, in your own mind of like, okay, this is my archetype, or this is my what's the word I'm looking for? Framing, like Ben was saying, the way you frame something, that's one thing. But then to go and then convince other people that that's what the story is, that's like another level.
Yeah.
I would personally go over my story in the past, but my story for the future is still unwritten, and that's kind of where I would get stuck, I think. I don't know if you guys, because I see people flexing even on their future story on, I'm going to be the president, or I'm going to do this, or this is who I'm going to be, or we're building something and it's going to grow to this. And it's like, well, like that's a narrative that hasn't happened yet, and you're flexing on that, you're pushing that.
Yeah, from one angle, you could look at that as a lot of people do it as like manifestation or visualization of like, if this is the story I tell, and if I say this is what's going to happen, it will make that happen. And I do think that is actually real to an extent, like it's not like you could say like the narrative that I am going to tell is now I can fly and whatever. There are limits to it, but the point is like when you manifest something or you project it into the future, you're like training all of your energy in that direction, and it helps it to happen. It can't help it to happen.
Like my personal interpretation on someone who's so I don't know, that needs to cling to some kind of narrative like that, is there's some kind of insecurity there, because I personally don't mind whatever people, maybe it's, I don't know, it's probably something to do with my type, but it's like, I don't mind if someone has a bad narrative of me. It doesn't matter. Like it doesn't feel like it affects me the way they see my story.
Oh, right. Because you're not doing PR in a severe state.
Hey, good for you, homie.
But
it's not good. It's not good.
Why? How could that not be good?
Because you're not controlling. You're not basically doing PR. You're not controlling other people's perception, and other people's perception of you, like it or not, does affect their attitude and their behavior and everything towards you, and even your ability to move in the world. I mean, it's not.
So why would you try and control? Why would you try and control something you have no control over?
Well, I think that's Andrew Tate's point, is that he thinks he does have control over everyone else's perception.
Yeah.
That sounds really stressful.
But to Ben's point, I do think there is, like, the three of us are skibs. I'm interested to hear what Jessica has to say about the idea of, because you said you don't know what's coming next necessarily, or like you're not tied to one specific point of view on what your story is. I think in general, like the we'll see attitude of OE, it makes that even on top of intuition or narrative or whatever.
It's even less than that, because like, so narratives sometimes protect you from pain, protect your ego. It's like if I'm anything less than the top of the mountain, then I'll feel pain. That's what it seems like a lot of the times, right? And so it's like I don't mind that. I don't mind being seen as less than the top of the mountain. Like, why do people have such a stigma around? And then some people have such a need to project that narrative, such a need to control the narrative so that they get seen as number one at the top. Yeah. It's like, oh, I lost that game, but it's only because, or even blame comes in there and stuff like that. It's like you're trying to protect. the narrative creation is like to protect your ego from pain.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. That's definitely how, like, Trump does that, Andrew Tate does
Right.
that. There are a lot of ones that do that. Yeah.
No one can
Yeah.
no one. Sorry, go ahead, Jessica.
No, you can go. I'm still
No, you go.
Fine. I very much do the whole like I would like, if I could, I know it's impossible, but I would like to control everyone's narrative of me because I do feel like it changes how you are treated and how you are seen. I'm definitely ego high though, and resonate a lot with, not a one, but like resonate a lot with the I am putting up a wall of like how I want you to see me because of the actual insecurity. I do think it's insecurity related.
No one who has a huge ego says that.
No, you're just
Sorry,
very
sorry, dude. No, sorry.
I am so good at this that I am like being humble.
I don't
as a
believe
way
you.
to
What
be
a- what a
like,
narrative.
I don't believe your story. I don't believe your narrative right now.
No, that is true. I do think that it's part of the reason why a lot of the people with I think SF Blast kind of does that, you know. Part of the ego is to set it up so that you're well liked by the tribe, and
yeah,
that
and
gives you that
you're
ego
equal
hit.
with everyone. You're not.
Yeah.
You don't want to be up here. You know,
What's
you
the
get
what's
highest nail gets hit.
what's the SF Blast is
SI
SCFI? Oh, S
SIFE.
opposite SIFE. Okay,
SI,
Yeah.
FE.
never mind. Can't relate.
So in a way, you could summarize the narrative as like controlling the perception of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't want people to think of me as an asshole, even though I do want to win. You know, so it's like this. It's a fine balance when you win a game or when you want to win, or you know, when you're competing.
That's true.
I'm curious if there's a difference to you. You can, with FE, you can probably easily see how the tribe views you. Do you ever feel like you get lost in your own perception of your own story?
I get lost in what's accurate and what's not accurate.
Yeah,
What
we will definitely dig into that.
Oh, I got whenever we get that. Yeah, I got something for that.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So I was just realizing too that what did you just say? You said something about the controlling the perception of you. Oh, when you win, it's like when you win, you don't want to be seen as the asshole when you do win. And I'm just like, oh, just don't win then, or just don't play that game. Don't be that. Like, and then you don't need to control the narrative. Like, you're free of it.
That is true. Yeah.
And like that's my bias, right?
Yeah.
But then you're still trying to control the narrative. You're like, okay, I'm gonna not win, so people don't think that about me.
Yeah, you're controlling your own perception of yourself in a way, you know? Like,
you're controlling the perception of you without touching the narrative for some reason.
Well, I think it's only controlling because since I'm only looking at narratives, you're just changing the narrative to I don't see myself as, quote, a winner, so that when I'm not a winner, I don't feel bad. But that doesn't change the fact, you know, that's still a story that you're telling yourself.
So to touch on those false narratives, sometimes people are very delusional about their narrative. Like they tell a story that it's just not true, but they'll push this narrative of themselves, of who they are, and no one will speak up. No one will fight it because they're too afraid to damage their ego or for whatever reason.
Yeah, I see that a lot too.
And then for some reason, they believe that narrative even more because no one's fighting them against it. And everyone else sort of believes the narrative, even though everyone knows it's not real. It's just like this weird mechanic.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it is a way. There is a level of, I think there's the two sides that I was talking about earlier, where you're creating your own story and how you understand your story versus how the tribe understands your story. And if you haven't blended those, if you have one story about yourself that nobody else sees or believes, you're going to have that problem where everybody's like, we're going to, shut up because we can see that you believe something about yourself that nobody else does. And nobody will tell you that. They'll just lie to you. But if you're good enough at marrying the two of how you see yourself and how the tribe sees you, there won't be that dissonance.
What does that mean, Emily? Like marrying the two, how you see yourself?
If you're aligning, okay, there's two things. The way Ben is talking about it is however the tribe sees you, move your personal narrative to fit that. That's one option. And then there's the option of how I see myself. I don't care how the tribe sees me, and we're gonna fight because everyone sees me differently than I see myself. And then there's one in the middle where the tribe both sees you how you see yourself, and there's no conflict, either because you convinced them of your own story or they convinced you of their story.
So that second one there sounds a lot like the way gaslighting.
Yeah,
comes into
exactly.
play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you said earlier, Jessica, I have a question. And like, my question is, what makes something accurate or not? What makes a story accurate or not? But I guess it's not really a question. It's more of a statement, which is that like, there's no such thing as like an accurate story. Just a story is a story is what I think. But I guess the question is, what do you mean when you say like accurate or not?
Well, there's definitely, I'm susceptible to like the mob commonality mentality, in that if like 50 people are saying one thing and one person is saying the opposite, it's hard not to skew toward like, well, how could 50 people be wrong and one person be right? I think a lot of it is, what I'm coming to is just the validation of inside self, which is like, I know this is true for me and I can't really prove it. And
there we go.
That sucks because I want to be able to prove it.
Welcome to my world.
No, it's definitely something I've struggled with too, where like you have a whole mob of people saying one narrative and then you're just like, I'm just on my own. I'm just like, that's not what happened. That's not the narrative. And like, good luck. Yeah.
It's like, that's just a narrative.
Right.
Yeah, but then there's a couple of ways that you could slice winning the true narrative. One is, and I see this, no offense to Benjamin, because I have TI too, but I see this lead TIs doing this a lot of like, I know this is the true thing and like, screw everybody else. You know, that makes it really, really difficult if you feel like you are that one outside of everybody who sees this story and you see a different one.
Why is that difficult?
Because
you also have to concede. Like double deciding is conceding a little bit of that narrative sometimes, being like, okay, yeah, I'll be seen as this, but then in the end, I'll be seen as this, or something like that. Like going through the pain temporarily to come out on top at the end.
Like, what are the chances you're the one right person out of 50? Like,
very
I mean, you
high.
Might be.
Very high.
Exactly.
If it's me, it's very no.
I mean, so far it's always been.
You could just like toss being right out the window. It's way easier.
It is, but like, how do you build?
Build what?
I don't like. If I don't know that stuff is true, how do I like?
You just do what feels good.
Understand. Yeah.
And then.
Yeah. Right, and then you have people who are extremely good at moving the whole group. You know, whether the group realizes it or not.
Right.
This is called propaganda, or it's called PR, or it's called spin, or really anything you want to say, where you're looking from the outside. Okay, what is the outcome that I want from this? And then how do I move everyone to believe that that's the outcome? And if you're able to do that, you have a lot of power.
I have a story. Can I tell a story?
Do it.
Okay, narrative time, Benjamin. So I went to this bar and I was just hanging out with my friends, whatever. And this girl comes up and she wants to know if we have like weed or anything to smoke. And I was like, yeah, I got one right here. She's like, oh, just light it up. I'm like, what are you talking about? We're in the middle of a club. And they're like, just light it up. I know the bouncer. I know the owner, whatever. She's like going on and on. So I was like, all right, fine. Like, let's just skip this out. So I light it up and the whole place starts reeking. The security guards come down.
Oh, no.
Like, and as soon as they come down, this girl just bursts out into, I told them not to light it up. Oh my God, how could they? And just like trying to control the narrative. And then I just go up to the security guard and I'm like, she's pretty good, eh? And he's like, and he grabs her and he throws her out.
Whoa.
But it's just like calling her out on the narrative in that moment. It was just like I wasn't trying to fight the narrative. I was
bingo, dude.
Yeah, I was just like,
bingo.
Look at her go. Like you can see she's telling the narrative, right?
If you fought it, you would have gotten thrown out.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
and he probably trusted you in that moment because you weren't defensive. You made light of it, right? So you have nothing to hide. You're not like.
But I was the one that lit it up. Still, like I should have gotten.
Yeah.
But like she was making such a big deal. It's just like
I would have thrown her out too. I would have kept you. Like this guy's chill.
Anyway, yeah. Okay, so another one I wanted to talk about is the connection between worldview and narratives, because like I just saw with my kids that next Avatar, Way of the Water, or whatever, and you can tell James Cameron is all about the whales and all about saving nature and all that kind of stuff. And then he creates a whole movie, a whole narrative around this to get people on board with this worldview, to sell the worldview. I'm just wondering if you guys are seeing that kind of thing too.
I noticed that when I saw that movie. Yeah.
I hate it when people do that.
Yeah. I felt there was like, it was like a cool movie and all, but it felt somewhat disingenuous. Like it was a little bit, some movies have a message, but it's not forced at all. It's just natural and you like connect with it. You feel it. Like you just relate to it automatically. But like this, there was a little bit of pushing in this movie. And I felt that.
Right.
Is that what you mean, Ben?
Yeah. You push on the narrative to get a worldview across, sort of thing.
Yeah. But sometimes like it doesn't feel pushed. It just is there. And it's just like, it's good. You just relate to it. But this one, I felt like there was some like.
Right.
Yeah.
I think this goes back to what you guys were saying about what's real or what's true and trying to figure out what those two things are. Because especially in art, I didn't see that particular movie, but I've seen this a lot in storytelling, is when the story is recognizable to other people as true to human experience and true to life, it won't come across as preachy. When your worldview is imposed so heavily that it doesn't, people can feel that it doesn't resonate as realistic in the sense of that's not how life works. That's not how we know life to work. That story isn't a real story in the sense that it's not metaphysically or symbolically true. Then it will feel forced that way.
Yeah, you get two colliding worldviews a lot in society, right? I'm sure you can think of 100 examples. And so every time you have these colliding worldviews, you have also colliding narratives and this kind of stuff. And each side seems to be pushing whatever worldview they're pushing. So like it's, and then you get the clashing of the narratives. So I'm wondering, like, can everybody be disingenuine? Like, is there a genuine way to give across? But like,
can I say something about that?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So I think when you know that what you have is a perspective and a worldview, you don't need to force it on. You can't consciously force a narrative or a worldview on somebody because you know it's just a narrative. So it's just something you would like share. You're like open about it, right? But you don't like force it. To me, that's what like genuine means. Disingenuine is like when you don't know it's a worldview, you think it's reality, you're insecure because your sense of identity is attached to some idea, which is going to make you feel insecure because you're much more than an idea. And that's where the disingenuine part comes in, is where there's a little bit of manipulation. It's not intentional though, but there is some manipulation. That's what makes it disingenuous.
I mean, people do the confirmation bias too. Like they will only accept the narratives that fit their worldview, and so like subconsciously.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and they'll fight the narratives that go against their worldview.
Yeah, this is also another way to talk about it is like interpretation, where you take a single event or a single thing that happens or a single something story, but everybody is looking at it from their certain worldview or perspective, and it causes you to have a different interpretation of what that means. And so I think, especially in art and movies and other types of story-driven work, if you have such a distinct perspective, like Mike was saying, that your interpretation is extremely rigid, that makes it feel hollow. You know,
disingenuous. Yeah, I think you're right on with that. Yeah, it's like too black and white.
Yeah, because to what I was saying earlier is we as humans know that there's no one interpretation of life. You can't, because we walk around every day and everybody's seeing something different in just the way we talk about stuff. You know that you can't come out of a story with only one interpretation. And if that's all you're left with at the end of a story,
I don't think people know that.
Yeah, that took me a really long time.
Deep down, everyone knows it.
You might not know it consciously, but you can feel. That's why you have that feeling of like, that didn't seem quite right.
No, you get the zealots. You get people who are very zealous about their worldview and their opinions, and they're not aware of how delusional they are.
I'm thinking of religion also, where like you have like one event, like someone looks like someone was healed, and like depending on your narrative and your worldview, you're gonna say like there's like 10 different narratives you can say, whether it was a miracle or whether the person just like got good endorphins at that moment. You know, like there's so many things.
Yeah, like thinking about a magic trick, even just a magic trick. The person who's captured by the magic is going to give over the narrative as if like the magic actually happened. And I mean,
because it did.
Before modern times, a lot of magic users were like people who were doing magic were using that to show that they were like miracle workers or things like this.
Yeah, but there's also a sense in which this, just coming from me as an abstract person, there's a sense in which it might not be literally true, but it is still true, you know? Like if you're using, there's a dissonance in using a quote, a magic trick or something fake to demonstrate something that's not really happening, but in which it could still be a true story, you know? True in its meaning, true in its abstraction, true in, that's what fiction is. It's not literally true, but it's still true in that sense.
It's true like an experiential.
Fairy tales too. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if media is always pushing some kind of agenda, but it often does. And a lot of, I think people are more aware of it now, and they have to be way more subtle. but definitely, you can be very. You can leave out little facts. You can include things that are, you can really craft the story to make the worldview come across and have people not pick up on what you're doing.
Yeah, this is why you have like such disparate like news sources now, where like I don't feel like I did when I was a kid. Of like I'm talking to friends who are like on the other side of the spectrum, and it's foreign what they're consuming, what they're reading, but it's about the same event. It's weird.
Right.
Ben, no one consciously manipulates people.
Oh yeah, they do. People consciously do, yeah.
No, you can't.
I mean, there's hypnotists out there. There's mentalists. I mean, there's a science around it. Commercials. You're trying to manipulate people to buy your product.
Yeah, I'm not saying no one manipulates people. I'm saying no one consciously chooses to manipulate people. Hypnotism is usually an agreed.
When it transfers the money sometimes as well, like getting you to buy a product or getting you to vote for a president, like lots of
I think we're maybe using two different definitions of manipulate. Maybe then.
Maybe.
Like if I'm like an extra, if I'm like a personal trainer, like I'm not manipulating. I wouldn't say I'm manipulating my client, right? It's like a shared thing.
I think you're just a very good soul, and you're projecting on the rest of the world that they're all good-hearted like you.
Okay, that's my point. That's my point is that we always project what is our internal state. So when people are manipulating other people, they're really projecting like what's inside them. It's not like they have this master plan that they're like, maybe they do, but like it's just really a reflection of what's inside them. All of us act in a way that reflects our inner state. So if someone is manipulating other people, they also manipulate themselves. They also live in that reality and they think that's real. So that's what I mean by they don't consciously do it.
Although I don't know, Edward Bernays might argue differently.
What's that?
He's basically the father of PR and propaganda. Pretty much. He started the advertising industry, where basically you're saying you realize and you know that some agenda that you have isn't true, but you're doing it purely from a
I'm thinking back to like the anti-communism stuff and like the World War II stuff on both sides and all that stuff.
Or even like fights with your spouse, like you're wrong.
But right, you're trying to win.
So why would you try and win a fight with your spouse?
Why do I want to try and
why would anyone try and win a fight with their spouse? That's
a good question. Because I'll see myself sometimes doing it even when like it's like, I like Sartre's like concept of like bad faith, even when I'm grasping for like all the wrong reasons, I know like deep down inside, and it's just, I don't know if it's just because I'm mad and I want someone else to suffer, or I just want someone else to like lift me up because I'm in a down place in that part. And
usually I would say like if someone's fighting in any situation, like even just arguing, it's because they have their sense of identity attached to, we could say, a narrative, right? But you don't know you don't know that. If you did it, you wouldn't be attached to it. You might be somewhat conscious of it, but when you're fully conscious that it's a narrative, you can't like identify with it. That's what makes you identify, is you don't know it's a narrative. You think it's reality. That's what I mean.
Yeah. No, I agree. I was thinking about this earlier in terms of like trauma too. Like if if the only way you were attached to like a parental figure was like by being a hard worker, and like so like you cannot let go, like that's deep, like that's like unconscious, like attaching is deep, and so like you're going to fight tooth and nail over the image of you being a hard worker, and I think it would take a very, very, very long time if you see that at all,
or a very painful experience that forces
Yeah.
you to wake up.
Yeah,
That happens too. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about the war on drugs too. How all like the propaganda around that, and sometimes you don't even need to have a real narrative. Like this is your brain on drugs, and you're frying eggs. Like obviously that's not real, right? Like obviously this is made up. But it's like sometimes you can push forward a worldview really quickly by having some kind of fake narrative, and that's why I was thinking about like fairy tales being so core to humanity. Like we're wired in some way to pick out a worldview from a narrative. It's like part of our structure. We're structured to see narratives, and so like giving over fairy tales to kids is like teaching them, hey, don't walk into some stranger's house and accept candy, like. Very simple.
Right. Kind of like the Bible is that in a sense, where it's like there's stories that convey something true. Like the stories aren't necessarily true, depending on what you believe. I don't know. But like the point, the meaning is in the story. Is that kind of what you mean, Ben?
Yeah, like with the war on drugs and then the fairy tales, sort of the same idea. I don't know. And like that's kind of what James Cameron was trying to do too. Like, I mean, that's all of his movies, like Terminator. Oh no, the AI is going to come and get you. The robots from the future.
True.
Be careful what you create. Yeah, it's like it's coming from his fears, right? And so he's giving over this narrative and this worldview, sharing his fears with people.
True, man.
Yeah, that's also to the point about fairy tales. I mean, like, I think that's also unavoidable, like people in development in developing people learn how to look at the world through stories. Humanity has always been a storytelling species, and so
exactly.
Story like kids stories or fairy tales or myths, or now we have a lot of like superhero narratives or the old Western narratives or any type of mythology that goes through humanity. That's like how we
the hero's journey too. That whole thing.
Formatively understand the world before we've experienced it. And I think it also helps to what I was saying earlier about oftentimes people can wake up in a story they didn't realize they were in. If you preload somebody, like for example a kid, regardless of what their type is or what their functions are or whatever, if you preload them with stories, when they start to experience life, they'll recognize those stories in their experiences.
That's right,
and it can be more or less traumatizing depending on the quality of the stories.
Where like it could be even like an evolutionary mechanism where we're wired to accept these stories and pass on these stories, and the cultures that were able to pass on the correct stories were able to survive whatever was coming because they've seen the narrative before, they've seen it played out, they processed it, and they know what to do in those situations.
Yeah.
I have a question for all of you, which is, what is the most powerful moment in your life where you realized a story, where you realized a narrative that you had that you didn't know was like the moment where you realized it was a narrative? Does that make sense, that question?
I personally have no idea what it makes sense. I personally have no idea what narrative I'm a part of. Like I don't know.
But please.
Yeah, well, I know the narratives that I tell myself, and there was one really powerful moment a few years ago when I separated that God from all my like super ego, where like God was not the same thing, and like the narrative I had about myself was that I was given like all these to-dos, and then it switched from I gave me all these to-dos, and that like changed.
Oh yeah,
that really freaked me up. But like I'm still kind of like reveling
a big like lens change,
Yes, it was huge. Yeah.
So but before you thought like you had to do these things, and then you realized it was you who decided you had to do them. Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, not even consciously, just picked
Right, of
up from
course.
cultural. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that it was not. It was
Is
not
there an
something
example
else inside of me.
is there an example of one of the to-dos?
You should be a good person. I don't know. You should brush your teeth. Like these are. I don't know.
Okay, now we're talking. This is my
Yeah.
language. Yeah.
But yeah.
What about you guys?
Emily, do you want to try to answer?
I mean, yeah, it's difficult because because I always see myself in some story and it changes almost by the second. Especially I see this really really obviously in comparison, not to make it completely about functions, but I do think it is tied somewhat to functions. When I'm talking with other people who are any at the top, it's very clear that we're cycling through different interpretations or different stories very quickly of what does this mean right now? What could it mean? What will it mean in the next moment? And to me, I don't. It might not be literally true, but I don't ever feel surprised by a story or a lens or a perspective, because my assumption is always that it's this and then it's this and then it's this and it's changing all the time.
You don't feel boxed in by a narrative, or
Mm-mm.
Well, I mean, there is a thing where, like, if something happens or you get caught with your pants down, something, it's always better to come out first and control the narrative than to have someone else control it for you. I just never was able to figure that one out.
Emily, what do you think about the idea that if you are suffering emotionally, it's because you are stuck in a narrative?
I think that's often true. Yeah, I think that's often true.
Yeah.
Cool. But
that's what I was saying at the beginning, where like a lot of people keep their narrative to protect themselves from pain. They don't accept difficult things about themselves or things they've done. They justify them out, and they have this whole story of what happened. It's like whether it's like you meet a lot of people where like the divorce, so they've got a whole narrative around the divorce where they come out the good guy and the spouse came out the bad guy, the ex-spouse or whatever, and then like deconstructing that, like it stays painful to hold on to that for so long. So I think you're right, but then in order to overcome that pain, you have to accept painful things about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, right. It is most of the time when you're having pain like that, it is because of a belief that you have, some belief.
I can't imagine a time where you're suffering emotionally and it's not because of a belief.
Yeah, but I would also say that
not to discount emotional suffering, not to discount the validity of pain. Yeah, I
get what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I do think also that it's not only down to the belief. That's not the only factor, because one of the really common themes or common patterns that I see, especially with observers, my kind of observers, is we so often change the narrative, especially if it's like low blast, DI, savior, any savior, low blast, low, like doing things in reality. The belief changes to fit what we're actually doing in reality. So that's why a lot of the Ennies, especially blast last, will get stuck not doing anything, because they'll change the narrative to, I shouldn't do anything in order to not feel pain. I'll just believe that I'm not doing anything here. And the problem isn't what they're believing, because they change that all the time. The problem is that they're literally not doing anything. If they would just start doing something, I see that in myself too. It's not always a belief that's the problem.
I guess my question to that would be like, why aren't they doing something? Why are they not doing anything?
Because it's easier.
It's easier.
It's easier than doing something.
It's easier to get rid of the pain of not doing something. Like, it's easier to just not do it. Like,
but isn't life more enjoyable and fulfilling when you're doing stuff?
Maybe.
Of course it is. Do you know anyone who's like really happy and fulfilled and they just don't do anything? Of course not.
Maybe, but I get the point that Emily is trying to say here. It's that maybe the person won't ever feel the pain because they keep shifting the narrative, and so they'll never feel the pain, and they won't hurt. There won't be any real pain because they keep not having beliefs. But there is a real pain because they're not doing anything.
Yeah,
I feel like doing stuff is just not like you don't need. I'm trying to think. Like, my belief here about what Emily is saying is that if someone isn't doing something, it's because of a belief they have that maybe doing something is difficult, or they've been hurt before last time they did something or tried, and that's what's stopping them. But like, look at a child who is like relatively like not conditioned. They just play, they just do shit all the time. Like they have natural curiosity. I think we're all kind of like that. It's only patterns of belief and thinking that prevent us from doing that, I would say. What's your thoughts on that?
I do think there are negative feedback loops where people can try to do something and then they feel like they didn't get the outcome that they wanted, and that negatively and reinforces that they shouldn't do that.
Right.
But I do think there is a general problem with difficulty doing things in reality. This is my specific problem. Difficulty doing things in reality and then just saying, okay, I'm going to believe something different so that I won't have to do that thing.
What's that?
It's like it's a similar problem. It's just a backwards.
What's that quote? You can ignore reality, but reality won't ignore you, or something like that. That's kind of what you're trying to say.
Can you?
It's like you can ignore reality for so long, but then like you're gonna have to face it eventually.
Yeah.
Can you restate what you just said, Emily, for me? A second ago, you said like
she's already 3 miles ahead.
Yeah.
No. Let's go back to that last one.
What did I say?
You said something that you recognize a problem where like I don't know if you said you change what you believe to avoid doing something. Is that what you said? Or
yeah, right. If I believe it would be great and excellent to do X thing.
Okay.
And it would be painful for me if I wanted to do that thing or believed I should and didn't do it.
Yeah.
It's easier to change my belief that I don't have to do it than to actually do it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I guess what my question would be in this situation that you're presenting is like, how do you feel in the moment? Is it that like you feel excited about potentially doing something, but you're also scared? So then you say, okay, I don't really have to do that. Is it like that?
No.
Or,
it feels like heavy pressure and responsibility for something that I know that I should do that I don't want to do.
When you say I know I should do, that I'm hearing like a belief there. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, like I just said, it's a circular thing. We're just looking at it from opposite perspectives. You're looking at it from the belief comes from the thing, and I'm looking at you do things because of your beliefs. It's the same thing. It's just we're going different directions on it.
Right. So in this hypothetical, it's like you believe you feel a lot of pressure, which are we on the same page that this pressure comes from a narrative? Or
there are some things that objectively you should do. You should wake up and not sit in your bed for the entire day. Like objectively, you should do that. But is it easier for me to change my belief that, it's fine if I sit in my bed the whole day and like look at Instagram?
It's a bit weird because like there's a reason why people do sit in their beds all day. So to say that like they should not do that is like an assumption. That doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just an assumption. It's a belief. It's a lens that you're putting on the situation.
We'll circle back. To
Go.
Yeah. Okay, so we got some comments and stuff, so we'll get to those. So narratives can give you a role, even if you're not that role. You can claim a role through a narrative. Oh, I'm a good boss. I've always had. I guess like when you go to a job interview and you put stuff on your resume, what you're doing is like you're claiming a narrative as well, that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's like the fake it till you make it sort of vibes, like I not only say that I'm this, but I let everyone else believe that I'm that, and therefore it allows me to become that, like opens the pathway.
Yeah. And here we got a question everybody can just say. Just give what they think.
Nah.
Yeah.
No.
I think you need them.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, it's
we're
like saying
wired
eating
in some
bad.
way. It's like built into us for some reason.
Yeah.
It's like saying fingers are bad.
Yeah.
Man, fingers are really bad. We should just not have them.
Yeah. So I have down here already about the gaslighting, and I have it as maybe contradictory narratives, but sourced in worldviews. Like you can both witness the same event, but because you have a different worldview, you'll frame the event differently and then argue about
what it means.
not what it means, but the event itself.
Yeah.
Like that's where I
Yeah,
see
but
the
that's-
gaslighting stuff.
Yeah, that's still an interpretation, though. You know.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's like the interpretation changes the events in some way, and then
It changes. Yeah, right. It changes what you think the events were. Because
right.
I would, from my position, I would argue that you cannot prove any event, the specific sensory of any event. It's only what is perceived about it.
Right. Yeah. No, because like I remember a relationship where I don't know, I was sitting at a restaurant or whatever, and then some girl was like yelling at me from like not at me specifically, just yelling, raising her voice or whatever. I'm behind. My headphone just died. 1 second. I'm gonna wear these ugly things and so yeah, she just yelled at me from behind, and then I just turned around like who was yelling, sort of thing. And then my ex accused me, oh, you heard it was a girl, so you looked at her, you were trying to check her
Oh,
out.
yeah.
Damn, bro.
And I was just like,
Damn.
that's not what happened. But it's like
Don't
you
lie,
can-
Dan. Don't lie. You know.
like for me, it's just like you get that SE startle, like something's happening around you. You jump and you look, you're like, what's going on? Why are you yelling? But it's like that's the argument, and like how do you have that argument? It's like that's not what happened. No, that is what happened. It's like the perspective on the event changed what happened.
Yeah.
Or intentions, like it's projecting intentions or something. Go ahead.
You said, how do you have that argument? You just don't have the argument.
Right.
You just
Yeah,
accept
don't
that. You just accept that that's what they believe, and that's okay, and they can believe whatever they want. And then you get to make. You then only then are you free to make your own choice about what you want to believe or what you want to do in response.
Yeah, you lean into it, Ben. You say, "Oh yeah, she was hot, right?"
Yeah. Did you see
What
that
did
girl?
you say?
Damn, dude.
Like 10 out of 10.
But it's
Can
like,
you do- can
but
you
like
do her
but
hair
going
like
back
that?
to controlling the narrative, it's like it's kind of important to make sure they don't have a bad narrative.
Yeah,
of
there's
you.
there's consequences to that.
Of
Right,
course,
exactly.
I don't know if I want to deal with those consequences. I'd rather
Yeah.
deal with the consequences of like where I push my narrative and those consequences. You
Well,
know?
then you've ruined the relationship.
Oh.
Right. I mean, I think it's an overtime thing, right? So I am constantly attempting to shape people's perception of me so that when things like that happen, I can give an explanation that is consistent with what somebody already knows about me. And if they can't
Right.
see what I'm projecting all the time about myself, then they're like so far beyond communication that it's like it's useless at that point.
Sometimes I feel like as well I get stuck in some narrative, some like this is who I am, like some kind of projection. Like I always feel that fight against projection where it's like, okay, they have a narrative of me, this is who I am in their eyes, and I can't fight it. Like they have all the proof, they've got the data to back it up, and it's like, but none of that is real. Like how do you fight that sort of thing? How do you take back control of the narrative?
Yeah, I think
Situations.
that's what I'm saying. Like I said it jokingly, but in that situation, what I actually would do is I would lean so far into it that then they would have to pull it back, you know?
That's actually pretty smart.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if I do that, but it sure sounds interesting.
But if you're
Yeah.
doing that on a micro level all the time, that's kind of what double deciding is. If you're
Can you-
doing that on a micro level constantly, it won't, when those big events happen, it won't be as big of a
Can you,
Yeah,
um,
you should
swing.
just, yeah.
Can you give an example of that, Emily, so I understand better?
Yeah, sure.
Like just to make up a hypothetical.
Yeah,
thing we do that, yeah.
I can't give you specifics, but I'll give you
Yeah,
an
just,
idea.
and just make something up so I know.
Like there are people are constantly say things, observations about you and themselves, just in everyday conversation that are likely not completely accurate to what your own vision of yourself and others is. So as those things happen, they're constantly happening. In a 20-minute conversation, it'll happen a bunch of times. You're watching for those all the time. You clock when somebody says something that's outside, like if you're trying to project this image of yourself, the minute you clock something that's outside of that, you either jokingly push them farther so that they're like, whoa, or or you pull them back somehow.
Yeah,
Masculinely pull them back. And if you do that all the time, you're just pinging people right back into your image, what you want there.
I get what you mean. I do that like without realizing it. If I'm in a really good mood, and like let's say I'm working at my job, it's like a cafe, and someone's like, "Man, like this never happens right here." I'm just like, "Yeah, this cafe fucking sucks. Let's burn it down." Or something like that. Like, and there's
exactly.
it's like, but I say it with like a smile. It kind of like
it diffuses the situation.
Yeah.
I love this idea for like if a person's gonna start out wanting to hate you, you're saying you're kind of just like letting that spin out.
Yeah.
my qualm with it is I don't know if it's because I'm feminine DI, but then I might take on their opinion.
yeah, right.
So it's actually kind of dangerous. Like it's probably not in reality, right? But like for me, it feels like it's dangerous. I'm like putting my own like perceptions of myself out there, and then they could be changed.
I think what Emily's what we're talking about, you can only do it if you like deeply know that what they're saying is a story. Then you can like play with it. But if you and I'm with you on this, Jessica, I've had the same thing where it's like if you feel a personal attachment to what's being said, you can't really do that because of that. Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
I get that too. Like if the person's pushing their narrative so many times and it's wrong, but they just keep saying it over and over and over again, you start believing it, you start buying into it, and like that's the gaslighting. That's the thing that people always talk about, the narcissist and the gaslighting.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Jessica, because I'm feminine DI too, and that is a risk. But I think also if we both have ego, which I think we do, or flex, you also have like a facade perception that you're projecting all the time, and you can allow people to put something there if you want, and it still is a little bit of separation between what you actually feel.
Yeah, I love this idea though, because it would encourage separation. Because you have to be separated in order to do it, and it feels like a fun game to play.
Yeah,
so it's like I'll do it for the sake of the game, and I get to be detached at the same time. Yeah.
But I think, like, not to shift the whole thing, but I think this works. Narratives are happening all the time on an interpersonal level, but also if you watch some of the classes, this is just interesting to me because it's kind of my quad. But if you watch some of the classes on the NEFEs, like Asia K. Dillon and Jessica Fozard, some of the things that that Dave and Shan say that they're doing, which I see too because I have NF Play High, is they're trying to look at the narrative of the whole tribe, and they're trying to do that for everyone. You know what I was just talking about, of like steering the perception or the understanding or the story of yourself to the tribe, but they're trying to also do that for the whole tribe, to change the whole understanding, to move, you could call it like the Overton window, to move that in a direction. And I think that's what NF Play does all the time, constantly.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I can see that. Yeah.
So I'm putting this here because like this is what I naturally feel as well. Ascribing intentions to others to form a narrative is incredibly shitty behavior. The only true narrative is the true intention of the person. So like that's exactly how I feel too. But it's like that's not gotten me anywhere in life. Like believing whatever you just said there. Like I believe that too to my core.
Where are you trying to go?
But like I get in trouble with believing this. Yeah.
Wait, what?
Where people aren't actually believing my intentions, they're believing their narrative over my intentions, sort of thing.
I think I think that is true. I think attributing intentions is always dangerous because you can't ever actually know someone else's intention.
Yeah.
Even when they try to communicate it as clearly as possible, it's still very difficult to actually really absorb that. So Ben, one of the problems that I see with single decide like IPs mostly is that they're not communicating all the time what their intentions are, so that people feel like all they can do is conclude about it. So if you, and then it's like it's lose-lose because you didn't communicate it and nobody believes you. And so that's back to what we were saying earlier of constantly trying to just like sort of put these like little PR shouts out into the space.
Right, those shouts you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's that trope in the movies too, where you get the two villains coming together, and they're like, "Okay, what's your motivation? What's your motivation? Okay, as long as we know each other's motivations, we can work together."
Yeah. But it is very difficult once you've reached the place where already you're in a situation where somebody has misattributed your intentions, and there's nothing you can do about it. That feels really difficult.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's only difficult if you want control over what they think. Yeah.
Well,
or no, just what do you think?
Well, yeah, someone saying something false about you is almost always, I mean, unless you like are really good with not having an ego, that always pisses me off.
For me, there's
well, if you know,
there's tribe tidal waves that are a result of that.
Yeah,
because if
right.
enough people start believing this thing and they start talking amongst themselves and it grows, then there's like a cascade of consequences. Yeah.
There's a cascade of consequences that if you it's like a snowball. Once it's rolling down a hill, you've like gotten yourself so deep in something that like it creates a bunch of bad outcomes that you can't necessarily stop. And even if you believe, like if you change your belief to be like, oh, this is fine, it's like you're the dog sitting in the flaming house, you know?
I'm not sure why you would concern yourself about what other people believe about you anyway.
Because it can create a lot of negative outcomes.
All of which you can't control. You can't control what another person thinks about you.
No, but you can prevent
Emily's
some
saying
bad
you can't.
outcomes.
Yeah, Emily's saying you can actually control.
Yeah, you can.
You can, and even with honesty, like even if you don't want to be dishonest, if you're doing it in good faith, you just want to put your real intentions out there so people don't mistake your intentions.
But you can put your real intentions out there, and they can just project whatever they think your intentions are.
They can,
right?
But you at least did what you could.
Yeah, so what you're saying is just like be yourself, be honest, yeah, right?
Or not even Mike, like your picture is like we're all on our own separate lane, and I can just like freely detach from things. It's like I agree with the theory. I just don't know if it ever works 100% in practice ever, because we're not in separate lanes actually. Like we're all like
intertwined and affecting each other.
Like this. And like so it would be really nice. I don't know, and I like the theory. I don't know how possible it is without being told.
My argument as somebody that's double activated DE, double desire, like high play, just extroverted in general, I'm so often pinging the tribe that my argument would be Mike is believing a narrative that he can do whatever he wants and it's his own story. Whereas the rest of the tribe is like going all crazy, bumping into him, like it's creating all of this chaos that he is like, this is my story. Mm-hmm. And from the DE perspective or the play perspective, it's like, well, no, you're just kind of like walking this like elbow brutally through the whole tribe and elbowing everybody and creating those kinds of waves that you're just not seeing because you don't believe them.
I guess like everyone gets to decide what things mean on their own, right? Like I could never control what Emily thinks, nor would I want to. If I respect Emily whatsoever, I would understand that she has a choice about what she believes, what she thinks about me or anybody else, right? So if I ever tried to control what Emily thought or manage what she thought about me,
okay, but here is, I think you're
we might be just defining things differently.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I think you're underestimating the amount to which the tribe is actually movable. Here's an example. I'll give you an actual concrete example for once in my life. We were at a restaurant this morning for brunch, and it was like it didn't have a very big parking lot, so people were like overflowing. It was kind of busy into like some of the shopping center parking lots and other places. Across the street, there was a place that was like a business that didn't want people from the restaurant parking there, and they had a bunch of towing signs. And we watched the truck get towed from that place right there because they parked literally right in front of the sign that said he'll get towed. Yeah. So then we were sitting there, we were like, oh, that sucks for that person. And then another dude, like 10 minutes later, came and parked right in that exact same spot because he believed that he could park there.
Right.
And he was doing, like, I would argue, no offense, I would argue the IP thing in abstract of I can park here because I can, because I believe that. And what you're saying in essence, not literally to this story, but what you're saying is, you could never tell that person not to park there because they wouldn't believe you because they're an IP and they would only ever believe their story. But we actually told him, hey, dude, we just saw somebody get towed literally 5 minutes ago. You might want to move. He was like, oh, okay, I'll move my car. So what I'm saying is you can do that more than you think with the tribe. So you can it is possible to take the attitude of, well, nothing I could ever do or ever say would ever change anybody's other story, so I might as well just not say it at all. But there's like a line between I can control everyone all the time of what they think with every narrative, which is like Andrew Tate level, and then there's all the way to there. And then there's somewhere in the middle of I do the best I can. I try to tell people do the best they can. We all try to move for each other. Yeah. And then it like kind of sort of comes out even. You know?
I think, Mike, though, you're dialing more into emotional pain and how to like, or is it actually about physicalities? Like you got someone to physically.
I guess it's not like what I'm saying is not that you can't like in Emily, in that example, you just walked over and you told that guy that he's going to get towed or whatever, right? But the way I'm defining it, you weren't trying to control his actions. You were simply sharing information. You were like giving, and it came from a place of like sharing, giving, communicating, rather than control or manipulation or an attempt to like, control.
But Mike, just to defend her, she said, don't get too sensory on this specific example. This is like an idea.
Yeah. I know it's just an example, but like what I'm saying is like, if that guy didn't listen to you and then you got into an argument with him and you were like yelling at him, now we've stepped over a boundary.
Oh, sure. Yeah, right. I mean, I'm demon controlled too. I would never say like you should go and try to strong arm people. I'm just saying I think you're overestimating them or underestimating the amount to which other people will move for you if you just tell them like, oh, this is actually my story. Most of the time people will move, especially if you're doing that constantly.
Agreed. If you're just like, if you tell your story without like needing to fight their story or whatever, you just share it, then it's actually usually pretty powerful and convincing.
I mean, boundary settings too is in a way telling some kind of narrative as well. Like you see people talking about the last time someone took their gum where they punched them in the face. Well, that story that they gave over, it's like, okay, well, now I know I'm not touching this guy's gum, right? And if they say that story to enough people, they're setting boundaries with all of these people. So this narrative is even used in that effect.
Yeah.
I think we're saying the same thing pretty much.
Okay, cool.
I think we're on the same page.
Yeah, both of our stories are right. Correct.
Yeah.
And done. We're finished here.
Well, yeah, we should wrap up anyways. Do you have any final thoughts? Let's just do final thoughts. Emily, do you want to start?
Sure. I would say it's very, very difficult to always see your own what you actually believe. You know, even if you, like me, see yourself as viewing everything within the lens of a story, sometimes it is difficult to see the story that you're telling yourself and to be able to actually assess like, oh, did I choose to believe this or did I just kind of unconsciously take this on? And the more often you can do that, I think the easier it will become and the less painful it will become. Because as things happen, you can see that you're either consciously or unconsciously like shoving them into these categories. And then when you can realize where you're doing that, you can adjust them as necessary, either to the outside world or to something that you have inside.
Yeah. What about you, Jessica? Do you have any? That's really good, by the way, Emily. Any final thoughts?
Just kind of affirming kind of what was brought up in the beginning that like as SI lead, I do have a very hard time seeing where I'm in the narrative, and then I feel like I'm surprised with it. And I feel like there's a lot of pain in trying, and you're unconsciously like pushing against like a narrative that is probably more true, and you're pushing and pushing and pushing, and then you can't deny the evidence anymore. And then it's like, oh, I'm that kind of person. And it's just like, boom. And
right,
like a
big updates
from that.
Yeah, huge narrative update.
Yeah.
Mike?
The most important thing in life is to be happy. And everyone has control over that. And the way you control how happy you are is by being aware of what you believe and not becoming attached to beliefs, and even choosing beliefs that make you feel good. And at the end of the day, what other people think about you doesn't matter unless you let it. That's it.
Like it. So I'll just end saying thank you everyone for coming. And like this is obviously just the beginning of this sort of conversation, but I'm glad we can start talking about it. And also one thing I wanted to wrap up by saying was just that also being in a typology community, like I see it's really hard for us to detach from those narratives and from that worldview and seeing ourselves in that lens. And it's just like, sometimes you can catch people always trying to fit things into that lens and that way of seeing things, where sometimes it doesn't fit in that lens and that way of seeing things. And I think just being, especially in this kind of community as well, just being more aware of that narrative too. Yeah. Anyways, that was my wrap up.
Oh, one more thing. Thank you guys for the conversation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this was
so much fun.
Thanks for setting up, Ben.
Yeah.
Okay, strong disagree. All right. Okay, have a good one, guys. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.